Welcome to RetroLogic. I'm Sam Wagers here with John Cummins and returning guest, Moses, aka the WellRedMage. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great. Yeah. Thanks for having me back.
Great.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming back, especially on not terribly long notice.
That's all good.
But I was looking for somebody to talk some Armored Core, and I remembered talking Armored Core with you before, so thought you were the right guy.
Yeah, we are a rare breed too. It's kind of hard to find Armored Core fans.
Yeah, for sure. But I've already spoiled the topic for tonight.
Uh-oh.
But that's what it is. I don't know. It's probably in the description of the episode anyway. But as we like to say, RetroLogic is not just a podcast. It is a whole community of retro gamers. We have an active, friendly, and free Discord. We have giveaways, Free Stuff Friday. Every Friday, we have free stuff. That's why we call it Free Stuff Friday. We have contests and a whole family of retro podcasts, such as RetroGroove, a music history podcast, Filmlogic, a streaming and movie film podcast, and On Topic Retro, a podcast dedicated to one video game per episode, hosted by our very own John Cummins. And you can find everything at our website, retrologic.games, including, I will mention the blog, which there has been some renewed activity on, and I hope to continue posting things to. So yeah, the website, it's a great place. Discord is also a great place. All that stuff can usually be found on Discord and talked about on Discord. So without further ado, let's move into some housekeeping about all those things. John, what's been happening with On Topic Retro?
So I'm doing something a little bit different. Instead of I've been kind of handpicking some games to do on the off episode that isn't a Retro Rewind episode. And instead of handpicking a game every other week, I've decided I'm going to do a podcast series on The Legend of Zelda. So the next, I guess it's going to take me, a year and a few months to do this, but every month we're going to do a different Zelda game. And I'm going to go in release order. So the first episode for The Legend of Zelda for the NES is already out. And next month, beginning of the month, I'll be recording Zelda 2. So I guess this going in release order kind of gives everybody an idea of when to tune in for their favorite Zelda, is how I kind of thought about it. So, you know how many months you have to wait to get to Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess, or I did kind of combine some of the handheld ones or multiplayer ones. So those will all be on one episode. But yeah, no, we're going to do that series. And then starting next month, we'll get back to Retro Rewind. There's a voting session up on Discord right now. You can go vote for a Game Boy Advance game that you want to play. I think the choices were Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Metroid Fusion, or Kuro Kuro Korin. So you guys go make your choices and we'll play whatever game wins.
Vote for Kururin. Do it.
I think it's
all right,
a hot tie right now, actually. I was just looking back at
it was neck and neck last I looked at it. Okay, well, as I mentioned, the blog has, I guess I mentioned this last post, but most recent post was on the lovely best way to end a video game, which is watching the bad guy's castle explode. Just kind of reminiscing a little bit. Pretty simple, but I hope it's a great journey down memory lane for people. It has GIFs, so that's. I think it's the first time I've used GIFs in a blog post. But yeah, nice. I had a lot of fun with that. And I'm still plugging away at Battle Network 3 Blue with streaming. Streams did move to YouTube, in case you have not heard that. So they're on my YouTube channel, Third Strongest Mole, under the live section or the playlist for Battle Network. So you can see that I am working towards 100% completion, something I was never able to do on my original copy of the game. But thanks to the Network Legacy Collection, you are able to trade. You are able to find people on the internet to get that completion because there's stuff that requires the other version. So I'm working towards it, getting everything. I have 5 out of 7 stars for the title screen at this point, so I'm narrowing down towards it. Next stream might be the last if I can get a little bit of help from some other people. Yeah, Moses, you have relaunched a podcast lately, and you've been streaming. Tell us about that.
Sure, staying busy, idle hands, as they say. The podcast was on break for almost a year, MageCast podcast. And the reason for that was just there's a lot of other projects that came my way, and I can't do everything, sadly. Wish I could. But bringing it back, we decided to get a co-host on, the great Criterion X. You should find him on Twitch. He does excellent, thoughtful streams. So far, we've done a Shadow of the Colossus episode, and then we've got several other episodes planned, but really just kind of trying to get into the flow of doing podcasting again. Next one is on Quest 64 with probably the person who's best qualified to talk about Quest 64, Quest Guy on Twitter. And so that should be fun. I know he's not going to hear this. I know he really wants to argue with me about it. I don't have any strong feelings about Quest 64. But I know some people do. As part of the charity stream that we just did, the community decided that if we hit $2,000 in donation funds, that I would live stream playing through Quest 64. So, such is my fate. This week, I'll be streaming through Quest 64. I guess. Thank God it's a short game. As far as I know, it's about like a 10 to 15 hour game.
Yeah.
So, well, have you played it recently? I haven't touched it since the 90s.
I haven't played it recently, but
Okay.
I will say that at least they didn't pick Chex Quest. Like that might have been a little more brutal.
There's certainly worse games out there. I'll give it that. It's just it's a weird game to base your entire personality on. But who am I to say I base my personality on Chrono Trigger's Final Fantasy memes? So. As far as streaming goes, like I said, we recently did a charity stream where we watched through the entirety of Final Fantasy X, which took 9.5 hours. That was kind of shocking as far as how much voiced content is in that game.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of surprising. I hadn't played it for a while, and I was NPCs all over the place. Obviously, your main characters, your main cast, a ton of voiced dialogue. So a lot of localization work. But beyond that, I'm playing through every Super Nintendo RPG on stream. So we're on to Final Fantasy II. That's Super Nintendo North American Final Fantasy II. Thank you very much. And then after that, we'll be moving on. It's a long list, like 47 games, using the RPG schema that I came up with. So wish me luck. And I have to get back to Enindo Way of the Ninja eventually. Have either of you played that one?
Yes.
Yeah? Did you beat it? Oh, no. You got it right there?
I haven't
right
beat
here.
it.
I know.
That game, a lot of people are like,
it?
Can you beat it? That's a good question.
Allegedly.
Yeah. There's
guy.
There's
actually 2 different endings, and it's like locked in based on I think it's just pure RNG when you leave the first dungeon.
It's kind of crazy, right? Because, if it shows Nobunaga getting injured or not, or something like that, or the type of injury, that reveals the kind of ending that you're going to get. I can't imagine somebody playing through this game twice, but in the time of playing it, I've met some really hardcore fans for Enindo. So there's a game for everybody. Quest 64, Enindo, Chex Quest.
Enindo is one of those games that I wouldn't say it's good, but it is interesting.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth a play for that reason.
Yeah. It's a lot of people were asking me like, well, what do you think is the worst RPG on the system? I haven't played them all yet, one, but they're like, Mystic Quest or Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. A 48 character password is not a good idea for an RPG. I'm sorry, it just is not. But I really had a hard time with a Nindo. I really, really did. That game is a struggle for sure. So props to anybody who's beaten it, because wow.
All right. Well, as for the rest of the RetroLogic family of podcasts, Filmlogic has just posted their summer awards show featuring the results of community voting. So check that out, especially if you were one of the community that voted. Find out what the results were. And RetroGroove is, of course, still on break for summer, but now is a great time to catch up on all of Season 2 in anticipation of Season 3. So check those out. Once again, everything can be found at the website retrologic.games. That's our hub for everything. With all that said, it is, of course, time for The Price is Retro. Are you guys ready?
Ready.
Yes. Time to play some games.
All right. Then let's play. All right, if this is your first time playing The Price is Retro, here is how we play. I'm going to list off 4 or 5 games, and everyone has to guess how much the lot is worth in total. Whoever is the closest to the actual value wins that round. Everyone has a list, and everyone guesses on each other's lists. At the end, the player that won the most rounds wins the episode, but watch out for our robot, Deus Guess Machina. He averages all of our guesses together to make his own guess. All right, we all have our lists. So, Moses, since you're the guest, would you like to go first?
I would. Thank you very much. So I'm going to tell you the names of these games, and you're going to guess the total value. Are you ready? They are all dragon themed too. I thought I'd keep it, kind of kitschy like that.
Nice.
Yeah. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, Eye of the Beholder, Super Nintendo, loose, used. Is used good enough for condition?
It could just be loose or complete in box.
Okay.
Yeah, primarily loose, complete, or
okay.
We don't do sealed.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
all right.
Loose, complete, or if it's like box only.
Got it. Okay,
like
these
that.
are all loose. So, first one, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, Eye of the Beholder, Super Nintendo. Dragon View, loose, Super Nintendo. Draken, loose, Super Nintendo. And King of Dragons, loose, Super Nintendo. And that's it.
Okay. I've got a guess ready. I'm going to say $240.
All right.
Okay. Hold on a second. Okay. I'm thinking I'm going to do 310.
Okay, and the result that I got was 270. So you were actually real close there.
270 even?
Yeah. Oh, I rounded up
Wow.
like the a little bit of
okay.
like couple of dimes and stuff here and there. So
actually that goes to the robot.
Yeah, definitely. He's almost exact.
Wow.
Yeah. He's like $5
we're both off
from exact.
I'm 30 under, you're 30 over.
I'm 40 over, right?
40 over, yeah.
Yeah, so he's like 5 off.
That goes to the robot.
Yeah. Of those, surprisingly, Dragon View was 150.
Yeah.
Woof.
Yeah, I knew Dragon View was the high value item there.
Yeah.
There's the reason I bought the Steam edition.
Yeah.
Because it was like $8 and on sale.
Yeah.
Awesome. If you want to, you can go through your list with individual prices.
Okay, sure. So Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was $16. Dragon View $150, Draken $12, and King of Dragons $92.
Okay.
Which is a lot for how short that game is, but I love that game too.
Yeah, King of Dragons was the one I wasn't sure of. That's what threw me
I was
off.
that was for me too.
It's a weird one. That one and its twin, Knights of the Round, they're both pretty pricey. They're right around the $100 mark.
Mhm.
So,
All right, Sam, you go next, or am I going next?
I can go next. My
Okay.
list has no theme other than they are Super Nintendo games that are loose that I happen to have right next to me when I was making the list. So, yeah, get ready for that. Where'd I put it?
The Lost List.
mm-hmm.
Did you delete your list, Sam?
It was right here. Oh, I moved it to a different window, not just a different tab. There it is. All right. First up, I have Phantom 2040. Again, these are all Super Nintendo loose. I'll say it again just for anybody who wasn't paying attention. Phantom 2040 for the Super Nintendo, loose. Spanky's Quest for the Super Nintendo, loose. Dino City for the Super Nintendo, loose. And lastly, Super Widget for the Super Nintendo, loose.
I'm going to go 190.
190, all right?
191. Can I do that?
190,
Okay.
191.
You totally
You can, in fact, do that.
I'm gonna be that guy.
I guess that means the robot is guessing 190.50.
Yep, 190 and a half.
You're all over, so John takes it
Nice.
since he had the lowest guess.
Prices right rules gotcha on this one.
Total value is $88.07.
Nice.
So none of these are too pricey. Phantom 2040 is $22.55. Spanky's Quest, $24.04. Dino City, $17.99. And Super Widget, $23.49.
And I don't own any of these. I don't know. I've played Dino City
I don't own.
for sure.
I know Widget, and I know.
I'll be honest, I still haven't played Dino City, but like, if there is a game that has a label that is just pure 90s, it's Dino City.
I think it's also pronounced Dinosity.
Dinosity? Yeah, I could believe it. I mean, it's got like a dinosaur wearing sunglasses and headphones and a leather jacket and a kid on a skateboard.
They just threw everything
Dinosaurs,
at it.
the game, like the TV show.
I mean, it might as well be, sure.
All right. Well, I guess I'm up next with the last list.
Those other three are all games I actually would recommend, though. So, for what it's worth, they're all pretty fun, interesting games, and
all
not
cheap,
not expensive. Yeah,
$88
under
gets you
$30, all under $30.
All righty, you guys ready for mine?
Yep.
All right. These are all like kind of robo themed because of Armored Core is kind of robot kind of themed.
That makes sense.
So I just grabbed some games. First one's Custom Robo, complete in box for the GameCube. The second game is Robo Warrior, complete in box for the NES. And the third game is Robot Tank, complete in box for the Atari 2600. The fourth game is Labo Toy-Con number 2, the Robot Kit. Complete in box for the Nintendo Switch. And the last game that I threw on my list at the last minute, because I don't know how I forgot this game, like Kirby Planet Robobot, complete in box for the 3DS. It's only the best Kirby game. And it has a robot in it, so it's like a win-win.
Nice.
All right, I think it's your turn to go first, Moses.
Oh, darn it. I was going to one-shot you with the $1 again.
Well, it didn't work last time.
Let me
Although
see.
I'm the one who usually guesses low.
Yeah, you
so.
guess low. Okay, I'm gonna try and guess lower than you. Then I'm gonna take a crack at it. I'm just gonna say 250. That seems pretty low to me. Watch you be like 150.
All right, I got 400.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
All right. So this lot is actually fairly cheap, coming in at $169.97.
Wow.
How? I thought that custom robo was gonna be enormous.
Some of them have come down, actually. Yeah. So custom robo is kind of the expensive game on this list, but it is only $61.96.
That's shocking.
Dang.
Wow.
Robo Warrior. This is a complete in-box NES game for $34. It's a really cheap one. Robot Tank for the Atari 2600 complete in box is only $19.47. Everyone run out and get their copies today. Labo Toy-Con 2 for the robot kit complete in box for the Switch is only $15.58. And then I really thought the Robobot was going to be the most expensive game, but it's come down quite a bit. Robobot for the 3DS complete in box is only $38.96. It's back down below its new value.
Wow.
Nice.
It was floating around like $70-$80 there for a while.
So we have a split on rounds. I believe John ekes out the win here. Because I think we were furthest off on his...
Yep, you guys were furthest off on my list.
By far.
Yep.
So I don't know what the actual total is if you've got it on the spreadsheet, but I believe you were closest.
Yes, my total difference was 141. And then you... Well, I guess...
Moses, I didn't win a round.
Moses would have took the last one. He was at 182 for total difference. And then the robot would have been quite a bit more than that, I think.
Yeah, he has a tough time on tiebreakers.
Yeah, he does. So, yeah, I guess I win that one by tiebreaker, by being closest on guess. So, awesome. I'll mark it down.
All right. We don't have any bonus games, but we do have a trivia card.
We do.
If you have that ready.
I do. Let me grab it. Moses, these are like usually super easy game trivia cards.
Uh-oh. It is after 10 o'clock, gentlemen, so
just be prepared to be underwhelmed by the
except when it's like a super easy question, but it's about like Grand Theft Auto, and I'm like,
if it's
what is that?
The ones that stump us are the characters in Grand Theft Auto. They'll be like, "Who is this guy? You know where's this guy from?" And it's like,
I've never played that. Clue. Yeah. Hopefully, it's like what type is Pikachu? I'll be like, I know that. I got that one down.
Yes, but this question is just as easy. What color are Sonic the Hedgehog's shoes?
Red.
Yes, they are. And then in the game of Tetris, what name is given to the shapes that descend from the top of the screen?
Tetraminos.
Oh, I thought you were gonna ask is it Tetraminos?
I have no idea.
No,
I've always heard Tetramino, but
I want to pronounce it like Dominoes.
There you go.
That's why.
Dominoes.
Tetraminos.
Tetraminos.
I'll take that. So yeah, you guys clearly smoke the trivia questions.
So allegedly, the blocks themselves have names. I was prepared for a question about that.
Yeah, That's weird stuff right there. Somebody was like
some weird. Was that in the manual? Is that what that was?
Yeah.
Now, is it only in the NES manual, or is it in the other? Because I think I have.
I
Tetris.
don't know.
I think I have the Tetris manual
somewhere, and it's one of those bits of knowledge that haunts me.
I have the Game Boy manual, so I can look.
I also want to just point out that according to this etymology here, Tetra 4 and Domino, so Tetramino is the correct pronunciation. There you go.
There we go.
You're the first person I've ever heard pronounce it that way, though. I've always heard everyone call it Tetramino.
Tetramino, yeah.
Well,
It's a
okay.
Dominino.
Dominoes. Domino effect. Knock one over, the other fall.
That's right.
All right. We'll be back with our show topic after a short break. So we are, of course, here to talk about Armored Core with the series coming back with Armored Core 6 just in a couple weeks this month. Looking back, of course, at the series history, some of our favorite games from it. But of course, first, I have a little something from our corporate overlords, I mean sponsors, that I would like to share, which we don't usually do this, but we have a sponsored episode here. This podcast is sponsored by the Bernard and Felix Foundation. Known worldwide for their precise long-range weaponry and naval weapon systems, the Bernard and Felix Foundation is at the forefront of recent developments in Kojima particle technology with their sphere facilities for energy generation. Kojima particles are, of course, 100% safe, clean, and efficient, and will in no way poison the atmosphere and render our entire planet uninhabitable. But even if they do, the talented scientists and staff of the Bernard and Felix Foundation are working on innovative solutions for the world of tomorrow. So make BFF your BFF today. We don't usually do sponsored content, but these guys seem pretty legit, so, you know.
Seems legitimate to me.
And yes, I did, out of all the many corporations in Armored Core, pick the Bernard and Felix Foundation solely for that BFF pun. So that helped me narrow it down. There are a lot to choose from. So for those that maybe didn't get the joke, Armored Core is a series of mecha action games where you play as a mercenary known as a Raven piloting an armored core. Well, usually it's called an armored core, which is a, high-powered mech capable of mass destruction, more or less, under the employ of various mega corporations who control the world in a dystopian future of some kind. There are a lot of games in the series. The timeline's been rebooted 3 times now, with Armored Core 6 being the third, I believe. There's some loose connections between others, so it's a little bit shaky with that. But it's been published by 10 different companies over time in different regions for different specific games. So they were always kind of hopping from publisher to publisher to keep this series going. But it did seem to be pretty successful. It was FromSoft's bread and butter. Back before they made Dark Souls, they were the Armored Core guys. So pretty much classified into generations. There are a lot of these games, by the way. But you can kind of think of it as generations, sort of like Pokemon games. There's basically 5 main generations, and 6 will be the 6th one, with spin-offs or supplemental kind of expansions afterwards. And most of these would use the same engine, but add parts. They would be new mission, new story. Generally, all existing parts would return, and they would keep adding to that list over time until they kind of reset again with some new mechanics and a new engine later on. So there's a lot of history there, but I'd like to just get into our own experiences. I know I actually started the series. It was when I first acquired a PS2. I never had a PS1, but, like many people, we convinced our parents to buy a PS2 for a DVD player, and were able to gain the benefits of a PlayStation 2 that way, which included the whole PS1 library because it was backwards compatible. And for whatever reason, when we got a PS2, we had this demo disc of PS1 games. It was one of the only things we had to play on it at first. And one of those games on there was the original Armored Core. And there wasn't a lot of content. Of course, it was a demo. but there was like one mission you could play, like a dozen parts to pick between, but there was also a versus mode option. And so my brother and I spent a good couple hours just playing that versus mode, messing with the different loadouts you could make in this limited version of Armored Core 1 and having a blast with it. And so it kind of like stuck in our minds like, oh, this Armored Core thing's really cool. Let's keep an eye out for it. Even though, like, of course, by this time, like, you couldn't even necessarily find a copy of that first game in stores anymore. You know, it wouldn't be sold new. So the first actual proper game we picked up was Silent Line. And it's still probably the one that sticks in my memory the most firmly. I played a lot of that. I still haven't played most of the games before it. I have Armored Core 2. I've messed with that a little bit. I don't think I've played it all the way through. And the later games, I played a little bit of 4 and a lot of 4's immediate sequel, Armored Core 4 Answer. They get a little cutesy with their sequel names. Yeah, those are the ones that stick out to me. I can certainly talk more about them and what made them special. But how about you, Moses? Where did you hop on the Armored Core train, so to speak?
I kind of don't remember, honestly. I know which ones I think I haven't played, and none of kind of the Armored Core 1 games here look really familiar at all. I know of them, but I want to say I didn't really jump on until Armored Core 2, Armored Core 3. I want to say too that like I'll meet people who will talk about how they followed magazines through the 90s and early 2000s. That just wasn't really my experience. Part of that is probably the different kinds of resources that were available for information in Hawaii growing up. But also, I was doing a big move from Hawaii to California in the early 2000s as well. I was recovering from major kidney surgery. So a lot of my stuff was packed up. What I really do remember most is Armored Core 3, which is also my favorite in the series. At one point, all I had out for gaming was Final Fantasy X and Armored Core 3. So I 100%ed Final Fantasy X on PS2 and then pretty much played Armored Core 3 like every day. And that one was a lot of fun. It was really fun to play with my brother. It really kind of cemented my perspective on how stylish this series is. Because obviously not the only mech game series there is. Having just played Front Mission, the remake that they put out, you know, there's that. Obviously not an action game, but a strategy game or a tactical RPG. But with that remake, I felt like it didn't have the kind of visual presentation that some of the Armored Core games do. I think they definitely have an edge to their visuals and a certain kind of style about them. With 3, it's all about that orange. It's all about that really bright, vivid neon orange that just kind of dominates everything in the game. So I know I've played 3. I believe I've played 2. Silent Line, Nexus, Last Raven. I did more recently check out 4 Answer and then Armored Core 5 or Verdict Day, which those might as well be the same game as far as my experience goes. And trying to re-understand how to play these games with 5 in particular was really difficult, and I'm reminded of just how much this game asks of people, how much this series asks of players. And that's coming right around when I played Elden Ring. So it's kind of fun to talk with modern FromSoft fans and just be like, well, I liked FromSoft before it was cool, but at the same time, in all seriousness, the Armored Core series is fairly different from at least everything that I've tried with Soulsborne and Elden Ring.
And hold on to that thought,
Right.
because
I'm sure there's a lot to
there's
unpack.
there's some discourse on Armored Core 6, and I think a lot of people want it to be, Dark Souls with mechs.
Right. And I think that I mean, you probably want to address that topic as we move along, so I'll save that thought. But as far as the previous kind of the retro Armored Cores, because was it Verdict Day is 10 years old, something like that? I think that's right.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been on hiatus.
So I mean, I was ready to call the series dead, and just be like, they're just not making Armored Cores anymore.
Well, in particular with Dark Souls, Elden Ring, all that stuff. Like, obviously this is no longer FromSoft's bread and butter. This is not what's going to make them money.
And that being said, I don't think that. I mean, Elden Ring asks a lot from people too, but there's a lot of ways to make that game more manageable. There's so many options that are given to you. When I first played it, I was a magic user, all ranged combat, so much easier than trying to play melee in that game. And that was my first real major kind of Soulsborne-ish Souls experience, at least from FromSoft. But could you imagine if Elden Ring had the kind of demanding complexity of gameplay and customization that the Armored Core series had? I don't know that that game would have been as successful as Elden Ring turned out to be. And I also don't know that we're going to see Armored Core 6 be as successful as Elden Ring was. There's a lot of clout that FromSoft carries now, and I think that's rightfully so. They make good stuff. Elden Ring was a great game. That was my game of the year. Really, really loved it. But I don't think that Armored Core 6 is going to be Elden Ring with mechs. I really don't.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting you mention kind of relearning the series with like 4 and 5, because those were kind of the bigger departure from there seems to me, from what I haven't played a lot of first gen other than that demo, but there seems to me a lot of continuity between the first 3 generations of Armored Core games. They largely have the same feel, the same pace, the same, to a fault, controls. Although it actually gets even worse with, like, by the time of Silent Line and 3, you had a lot more options for your offhand weapon. It's one thing to look for an opening with a laser blade and move your thumb from square to circle. It's another to have to hold down both those buttons to fire guns while boosting and strafing and keeping a lock on an opponent.
Yeah. Demanding,
but
there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, and definitely that is probably the biggest hurdle I think people will have with those older games, is just, this is before people defaulted to 2 analog sticks, 2 triggers as the main way of controlling anything. So that's probably going to take a lot of getting used to. But with 4, there was definitely a bigger emphasis on speed. I actually really enjoyed that. I'm not somebody who typically gravitates towards games with very, like, twitchy reactionary gameplay, but I think it was interesting how 4 Answer really, like, added that while keeping the essence of Armored Core. But at the same time, it just felt really liberating to not have to manage your energy so hyper efficiently and be able to boost out of the way of things when you need to. It's very, if you look up gameplay, it's funny the way quick boost works and how you can spam it just about constantly. These giant mechs basically start flying around like dragonflies, like flitting back and forth constantly. But once you get used to it, like, it was actually really fun, I thought. And then 5, besides putting a big emphasis on the multiplayer, which I suppose there was a community for, I never really found that community myself. I think it was bigger in Japan, certainly. But it centered a lot around teamwork and co-op and PvP. and as such was a lot more about like building your mech to fill specific team roles. One of the things that was very frustrating just playing it single player was there was essentially like a weapon triangle between like energy, physical, and chemical damage types and armor types, which meant that if you just like had a bad matchup against a certain enemy, you were kind of SOL. So there were a lot of things. It kind of soured a lot of people, and it's generally regarded the reason we didn't see many games after that. I'm sure it has its fans, as all games usually do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why you thought the series ended the way it did for so long. Taking a cursory glance just now at reception, it looks like 2 was generally received pretty well, 3 a little less so, and then when you get through 4 and 5, more mixed and more kind of average, and some not so great reviews for those. So maybe a lot of what you're describing here kind of describes that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think too with 5 there was that push for. I mean, this was a time when games like Call of Duty were huge. Games, anything that you could make a big multiplayer experience was going to just rake in so much more money. So there was a lot of push for that, and I think the idea of a multiplayer focused Armored Core sounds really good, but like, especially for what little I played of it, like I just wasn't even like finding people to play with, so it just completely fell flat, and it came at the expense of the single player content.
That's the big mistake.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like I said, my initial experience with the series was actually multiplayer primarily. It was that versus mode, but it was, you know, a couch versus environment with a sibling, which is very different from an online ranked ladder, and especially one that requires team PvP. Like, you just need a large player base for that to be successful, and it's a very hard sell for a series that was really always niche.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
it feels like with 4 and 5, and again, this is from a distance. So my gaming experience was I kind of stopped really doing modern games in the middle of the 2000s and didn't come back until the middle of the 2010s. So a whole decade absent. And then when I did come back, like I came back with like a freaking, I think the first thing I came back with was like a Nintendo Wii that I got off a friend. So I was pretty far removed from a lot of modern gaming and kind of watched things from a distance. So things like Armored Core. But I really felt that in a way it just wasn't kind of for me anymore. And maybe you encapsulized that in this idea that it was shooting for the multiplayer experience and at the expense of the single player content. And the single player content is what I knew this series for. I didn't necessarily want to play against people online, you know?
Yeah. John, how are you doing here? I know you've been quiet, but have you encountered this series to any extent, or is this all foreign language to you?
I know of the series. I've watched people play. I didn't have a PlayStation until PlayStation 3. And I have a kind of a similar void or, spot in my gaming history similar to Moses, where after GameCube, I pre-ordered a Wii, never picked one up, kind of dropped that pre-order, and I just quit playing games until probably pretty close to PS4 time frame. I picked up a PS3, I think in like 2011, and played like some Uncharted and just things that didn't require a whole lot out of being a gamer, but it was more story driven because I had little kids at the time and didn't have as much time. So Armored Core was definitely not something I was going to be trying to hop into. The kind of dedication it sounds like it takes just to play the single player. But No, it's definitely something that I might try to get into with the newest game. Looking back at some of the old games and their prices, I'm probably not gonna try to go after those. They were all crept up pretty good now.
Yeah, they
But
used to be quite cheap, but I know some had always been expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like
yeah,
I think Master of Arena and like Nexus were always like quite expensive. But I think I've used it in Prices Retro like more than once now. And the
yeah,
first time I did, like most of them weren't. There was like the one that was expensive, and the others were like $35 maybe. It's funny. It's actually something I look for when I go to stores. I don't shop at stores in person that often. I do a lot of my pickups just online. I find it's easier to get the best deals that way these days, unfortunately.
yeah.
But partly as a result of most places will alphabetize their inventory, and so I'm looking at A's. I'm like, oh, they got any Armored Cores? Sometimes they do. That's how I got Armored Core 2.
I don't have any experience, but I have a feeling this game, even the older ones, probably move a little bit faster than like Steel Battalion does. Because I
Probably,
played some
yeah.
Steel Battalion.
Well, Steel Battalion, you gotta get that controller, right? Good luck with that.
My brother-in-law had it, and we played it quite a bit.
I did pick up Gun Griffin Blaze a while ago. It's not the same. It's not the same
No.
though. It definitely Armored Core has something special even compared to other mech games. But I do want to kind of just hit on that. I don't know if you have any thoughts that come to mind immediately, Moses. But what do you think is special about Armored Core?
That's a great question. So my brother, just tell a brief personal story. My brother doesn't really game too much. He is somebody who's very into music. He works really hard. He has a large family, so he just doesn't have a lot of time for gaming. His favorite hobby is working with gardens and plants. But he always loved Armored Core. I remember when we picked up, I want to say it was Last Raven. And this guy, like, we get home, we play it. It's midnight. We're still young, so I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm just gonna go to bed. He's like, all right, I'm gonna go to bed in a minute. I get up the next morning and he's still playing it. I was like, did you sit there all night long? And he's like, I need to go to bed, dude. I was like, then go to bed. Like, what are you doing?
He's like, please take this.
I know,
from me.
like you pulled an all-nighter.
It's funny because he actually sounds a lot like my brother.
Oh, really?
Actually, like he's kind of fallen off games generally, but he still has like some very like in-depth, complex games that he gets super into. Like,
yeah,
he plays like grand strategy games and like. Well, he hasn't played Armored Core in some time, but it's one of the ones that stuck with him over time. Like I told him 6 was coming out, and he's suddenly interested.
Yeah,
that and Farm Sims, also Farm Sims.
But. A man after my own heart.
Yeah, me too.
I love a good farm sim. So I think my brother likes games as an idea, but I think he's also kind of afraid of them taking up all his time. So. Not too long ago, he asked me to help him shop for a PS4, and I did, and he found one, and he managed to play. Which one is there? One on PS4? There is, right? Or maybe I'm misremembering.
On PS4, is that 5 or 5 was? I think
5 is still PS3.
Yeah, I think it is still PS3. Yeah. So you know what? It must have been that he bought a PS3. Oh no! Here's the story. So I had a second PS3 that I gave to him, and I also gave him a copy of Armored Core 5 or Verdict Day, either of those two. And so he's playing that, and he's kind of like, "Oh man, it's so great!" And for New Year's, he stayed up all night again, played through Armored Core, and then he decides to buy a PS4. But then he asked me after buying the PS4, he's like, "So where's all the Armored Core games, dude?" I was like, well, funny thing, they're
stuck on PS3.
Yeah, they don't really make those anymore. And he's like, what? Where's all the, the ports? And then so he asks, he's like, well, are there any other good mech games? And honestly, the only game that came to my mind was Daemon X Machina for Switch. And I've never even played that. I don't know why.
Yeah, I was looking forward to Daemon X Machina, but I was ultimately quite disappointed in it.
And that was what I heard from most folk. I don't know, why when I saw it, I had zero interest in it. It looks like it's overly stylish, maybe. 'Cause it doesn't seem at all like Armored Core, despite the fact that it's a mech third-person shooter action.
Yeah, it was positioned. It was positioned as a spiritual successor
Really? Okay.
to Armored Core, and actually shares a producer with some of the series. I had it in the notes here. Kenichiro Tsukuda. He is the producer from Armored Core 2, 3, and Silent Line.
Mm-hmm.
Is the producer of Daemon X Machina. And also the mech designs by Shoji Kawamori, who worked on every Armored Core up through 4 and 4 Answer. So everything before 5, he worked on it.
The designs,
designing the mechs.
They look like ACs, like.
Yeah, and he's also involved in a lot of mech anime stuff as well. Like I think he did a lot of stuff in the Macross series. Like he's just like one of the premier mech designers for Japanese fiction, I guess. But yeah. So like, it was, and at a time when Armored Core had disappeared, it's like, this is, the revival of the series, but yeah, a anime subplot was not what Armored Core was missing. If it was missing anything.
I personally, I kind of burnt out on anime at a young age, so it's not something that I leap towards. I don't know if that's exactly the vibe that I got from it, but I just almost had zero interest in picking it up. And
did you play the demo?
No, I didn't do nothing. I saw it in one of the Nintendo Directs, and I was like, "Whoa, cool! They're making a mech game."
It was also a game that did suffer a bit performance wise, especially on the Switch. I think it's done a little better when it came to PC.
Okay,
but I haven't heard much about it. But I don't have as many, contacts in the PC world.
To other consoles now?
I think it's on other consoles too. I know it's on PC.
So. Looks like Switch and PC, according to Wikipedia.
Evidently, it didn't do too bad because it actually has a sequel in development titled Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion.
Boy, that is that's a JRPG title if you ever saw it right there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we got Armored Core 4 Answer.
Right. No, that's true.
Silent Line is the worst, though, because it inverts it. The proper title is Silent Line Armored Core, not Armored Core Silent Line, for whatever reason.
Which one is the one where, was it Last Raven, where you only have like the 48-hour period of time to finish the game in or something like that?
It could be, but I haven't played Last Raven.
Oh, okay.
So.
There was one that I picked up and I was like, no. And it was something like that where you had to beat the game in a limited amount of missions. And you had a ton of options. And if you didn't, it would kind of do like a new game plusy kind of thing and restart. And I dropped that one almost immediately, but it was a blind purchase type thing, based on the name.
Gotcha.
So I think it was Last Raven.
Almost sounds kind of Majora Mask.
Yeah. At first you're like, this is a cool idea.
I'm thinking about it too, because I'm directing this to you. Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter. I want to see you play that.
Yeah.
It's another game I understand why people don't like it, but I think it's super interesting. Yeah. I think you would have interesting things to say about it.
I've checked it out.
I also think you might hate it.
I checked it out a couple times. It's not easy on the eyes, we'll say that so far, but I kind of get like, maybe they're doing like a rogue-ish type thing here. It's definitely a weird departure from the previous Breath of Fires for sure. So we all know how that goes with JRPGs.
Just wait for the remake. It'll come out here.
There you go. Soon. Speaking of remakes, what they need to do with Armored Core is they need to give us an Armored Core collection, which is probably my best hope for 6 if 6 does well. And I expect that it'll move some units considering, its proximity to Elden Ring. Hopefully they can give us a retro Armored Core collection. I think that would be really rad. Even if it was just the mainline kind of numbered titles, that'd be super cool.
Yeah. But just kind of
hopes.
backtracking a little bit to what I think makes the series so special.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things, which is kind of a feature, I think, of the mech genre, but the amazing amount of customizability is, really central. I actually talked about this before. It's why I like mechs in video games even more than I like them other places, because it always pretty much carries with it this heavy functional customization. It's not just about cosmetics. It's about, building within real constraints. Like you always have like engineering constraints. Like you can't throw everything. You can't throw all the best parts together. Like you have to balance weight and heat and energy consumption. And I love that stuff. I love the fine tuning and optimizing for different tasks.
Yeah, and you have to balance it against your play style too. You may not necessarily be geared naturally towards certain play styles. For instance, for me in 3, I found it much more beneficial to have a lightweight AC that could do these really neat hit and run attacks. I built one. I think I can even remember the colors and the name. I think I called it Bloodstone. It was green and red. And in 3, you could draw your own emblems, which I thought was super cool. But it used a really rapid fire machine gun that would kind of stagger opponents. And then I had a really good laser weapon, laser blade. So I'd stun them, come in from behind, swipe them, and then dash away and kind of recharge and then do it again. And my brother was like, don't use that robot anymore. Like every time we play multiplayer.
Well, it's usually nothing more than a gimmick, but I think in every game I always feel compelled to build for the maximum amount of speed and 2 laser blades as the only weapons.
Oh, so fun. Yeah.
Just for the cool factor.
Yeah.
Knives only.
And then at that point, it's like you just let your opponent waste their ammunition. You just dodge everything. And then eventually they're a tank. They're just like cannon arms that can't fire. Swoop on in, I feel like I was going to mention something else, but it's gone. So whatever it was you're going to say, I was going to piggyback off that, but yeah, can't remember what it was.
One of the other things, just as I was kind of re-exploring some memories here, is they had some amazing opening cinematics for these games. And I think accompanying with it, I didn't think much about the soundtrack at first. But watching the opening cinematic for Silent Line and hearing the Silent Line theme, was seriously a big, memories unlocked experience for me. I didn't realize this game was that important to me. But I was like, yes, this is so cool.
Yeah, that's me.
I feel like it holds up, today. Mm-hmm. It looks like a great cinematic even now. And I'm not even somebody who cares about cinematics.
It's just a great way to open these games, for me, I still remember, the of 3, I can always hear that in the back of my head, and sometimes I'll go back and I'll watch these cutscenes on YouTube and stuff like that. I remember what it was I was gonna say, because you had mentioned customizations, and I feel like something that you could do customizations poorly, and I realized this when I was playing Front Mission first remake. At least at the point that I was in the game.
I'll grant that for Front Mission.
Yeah, where it just felt like all I was doing was upgrading the robots. It didn't feel like I was customizing the robots. And there's a big difference.
That's 100% Front Mission's problem.
Yeah.
At least the first game. I haven't played the later ones.
I was just kind of shocked at that realization and was like, why am I bombarded with so many new
at any given point in the game, there is a best weapon of every type.
Yeah,
there's no real decision.
And so all I did was kind of make the same robot for my entire team and just march them out and do the same thing with all of them because it really seemed optimal to me. Whereas with your AC in Armored Core, you can definitely find different best choices. Certainly depending on the mission that you're playing. So they're not all, up against another Raven. Sometimes it's like, hey, go in and guard this truck, a convoy, an escort mission. Sometimes it's go in and it's an assassination mission against like a small target, or you'll get ambushed. And it seems like there's better builds for certain situations. So I think
there's going to be missions that you restart like, oh, I need long range weapons.
Absolutely. So you can't kind of carry yourself through the entire game with just one build, unless you're just like brilliant, and you're just that good at video games. But
well, and that's something the best of the games did really well is like there's always a way. Like it might not be the easiest way, but like they did a pretty good job with a lot of these of making it doable with almost any loadout. Not equal difficulty,
right?
I mean, I know there's people who will do the laser blades only for like every mission.
Those people are divine. Like that's some hard stuff. Especially, you're facing off some bosses that could be flying or swimming or a whole range of things. So I really feel like what you say, customization is great for Armored Core, but it's also meaningful customization and not just upgrades.
But speaking of the missions specifically, I found that a lot of these games had a good variety with mission objectives. Are there any missions from the games you played the most that stood out as the most memorable?
Actually, when I said swimming bosses, there's one in Armored Core 3 where you fight a kind of submarine boss that would keep, breaching the surface and then going back down. And every time it breaches, it would throw a bunch of missiles at you. That one took me so long. I was not using, because if you fall into the water, you just sink and die. Right. So like there's a platform in the middle and there's a couple platforms in this like arena area. And I was not using like hovercraft legs at the time, but I had to adjust everything I was doing with my build in order to accommodate those hovercraft legs, specifically so I could just beat this boss because I got stuck at him for a pretty long time. So that one sticks out in my head for sure.
One of the ones that immediately jumps to my mind, partly due to frustration, but I think it's ultimately a pretty good design because it serves as a wake-up call mission, semi-early in the, like far enough into the game you think you have a handle on things, but then it cranks up the difficulty, is a mission to activate fire suppression systems in a burning power plant in Silent Line. Part of the reason this serves as a wake-up call is if you're playing the game the first time, you probably have yet to upgrade your radiator unit. And this mission will teach you why that's important, because the power plant is on fire and you take damage from overheating while in those burning areas, and you will continue taking damage until you cool down. And if you have a crappy radiator, that will be a long time. It's also at the very end, after you've been worn down by this fire, the very first time you encounter one of the strongest enemies in the game, which is a mystery AC. I don't think it has an official name, but most players refer to it as the Big White because they're big and white. And they basically have cheat parts. They're heavily armored, heavily armed, and move faster than you. The last mission has you fight two of them back to back, and then the final boss. But this is the first time he appears, and usually because you probably have barely any health left because of the fire, he will eat your lunch at the end there. But that one always stood out to me. The others from 4 Answer is the Arms Forts, which is kind of 4 Answer's big thing. I think they were in 4 as well, but they were definitely a focus in 4 Answer. And Arms Forts are like mega bosses, basically. Other games had bosses, but Arms Forts are like set pieces, not just bosses. Like these things are like the Death Star. And that's what it feels like to take one on, is like to fly it down a trench and blow up the Death Star. It's always really cool. And particularly like the premiere one, which is on the cover of the game, called The Spirit of the Mother Will. actually built by our friends, Bernard and Felix Foundation. I looked that up to verify. And it's just this giant like walker with giant cannons on it. And you have to start the mission on the approach with this thing called a Vanguard Overboost, which is basically a multi-stage rocket strapped to your AC that they use to get you close so that it doesn't just blast you into dust before you even get there. And you have to actually dodge fire from it as you're coming in, but it doesn't get you all the way. So like you have to get that last leg just with your regular boosters. And then, you know, like blow up several different weak points around it to cause the whole thing to overheat. But it was always just like the coolest mission ever in my mind. So that's one that stands out. And definitely I'm not the only one who loved it. They actually brought it back in Armored Core 5. Even though it didn't make sense to, just because, just as a reference. It's like how they keep bringing back 9-Ball. He works his way into most games as some kind of secret super boss. But yeah.
Have you played the PSP game? I see you have it listed here.
I just listed it last second because it didn't make the list of other things. I'm not even sure where it fits continuity wise, but there's a PSP game called Formula Front.
I'll have to look at it. Maybe it's cheaper than the other ones.
So one other thing I just wanted to touch on, since the game is about mercenaries ultimately, one of the cool features of that is most games have an arena as well as missions where you can fight the other Ravens one-on-one. You'll also encounter them in missions, though. Sometimes you'll work alongside them. Sometimes you'll be fighting against them on opposite sides. And it's always just this like, oh crap moment when a mission's going well and they're like, great, you completed the objective, or you're almost, you know, out of there. You almost completed the objective. And then the other AC shows up. And you're like, I remember fighting this guy in the arena and I barely beat him. And that was when I started with full health and full ammo. Right now, I do not have full health and full ammo. This is going to suck. You know what sucks even more? Sometimes he brings a friend.
Yeah, those rarely feel good. Especially your first time through where you're just like, piece of cake. You just blow away everything, you know. You take your hits. You're like, I got plenty of life to make it to the end of this level. And then the guy shows up. Hello, Raven. I've been waiting for you. And you're like, oh no.
Mm-hmm.
Time for a showdown with Czech's laser rifle. 2 shots left. And yeah, usually that's a restart the mission. And
well, and it's one of the things that fed into why the games are so difficult.
Yeah.
Traditionally, they're very sparing on giving you any way to replenish any resource during a mission. That is something that does seem set to change from Armored Core 6. But that's what kind of really attributed to it. Like, you feel every hit. You feel like you have to ration your ammo because like you're not getting anything back until you succeed at your mission. Mm-hmm. And so that's what really like fed into that feeling of like, oh crap, I'm already not doing so great, and another AC just showed up.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right when you say, you know, you feel every hit, even from those little weenie tanks and things that are like, you know, a fraction of your size. It definitely doesn't feel well. There's also something that I think is a strength of this series, at least from what I've played. I have not played all of them by any means. And that, I think, is the characterization of your player character, your Raven. There's not a whole lot there. Like it's more the avatar approach, it seems like, rather than the fully fledged character. And so you kind of get to get inside of this machine and experience kind of that cowboy swagger of the showdown when another Raven shows up with their decked out AC, rather than you following like the arc of a predefined character. Something I enjoy.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because what they liked to do with some of the sequel games is have that protagonist from the previous game show up, sometimes as an antagonist in the future game. It's not always spelled out; like you have to kind of like dig for it.
Okay.
But one of the more well-known ones is the main antagonist of Armored Core 2. Leos Klein is heavily implied to be the protagonist from Ninebreaker, which is very interesting, and it does color some of his actions as well. I know also White Glint appears. The White Glint that appears in 4 Answer is not the White Glint from 4, but actually the protagonist from 4, who killed the original White Glint. So that's interesting in and of itself. But we've touched on it a few times. It seems inescapable. People are already comparing Armored Core 6 to Dark Souls or to Elden Ring. Is that appropriate? Should we be doing that? Should we be expecting that? Maybe. There is some stuff, and I've heard some, searched for Armored Core fans online. They're a little bit easier to find these days. There's some people who are a little bit worried that they're going to Dark Soulsify this and take away some of what makes Armored Core Armored Core. There was a lot of controversy over the early gameplay footage showing these quick turns, and they're like, "Oh no, can you not break your lock on a target? Like, if the lock on is just permanent and you can't lose a lock on, then aiming isn't really a thing, and that means this is going to be very simplified." That doesn't seem to 100% be the case. But it's still kind of an open question. Like, how does lock-on work these days? Because a lot of the gameplay footage shown, quick turn seems to be an automatic thing, not a manual maneuver. But it's always hard to tell. You don't know if they just captured footage of somebody who just does it manually perfectly. But there seems to be a reluctance to show the target lock breaking. I did see on the extended footage, at the very least, when something disappears behind cover completely, you will lose a lock. So it happens at the very least. It just seems to be a lot more lenient than it used to be. The other thing that's kind of interesting, and as I brought up, the game's usually been pretty sparse with the ability to replenish stuff, is they did confirm there are going to be repair kits, which basically work like Estus flasks from a Dark Souls game. So they're limited quantity. You're still going to feel that pressure for sure, just like you would in Dark Souls. But I do find that interesting because that's something Armored Core hasn't really had in the past.
It's potentially easy to see how simply trying to remake the games that they made 10 years ago for Armored Core isn't really going to help them, and that some kind of evolution needs to take place. I hesitate to think that it would be the right choice to Dark Soulsify Armored Core, because again, that could eradicate what makes it unique and makes it special. It would be a shame if it was just, Souls, but with robots rather than with, kind of mystical swordsmen and things like that. But at the same time, I think this is, especially after a decade, an opportunity for them to think, how do we make this a bit more accessible? I've played some of the old games that even I'm kind of afraid to pick up 6. Because of the time that I have available and just so many games that I deal with, I don't really follow too much ahead of a release. These days, they're putting out, like Sea of Stars just put out a documentary. I think that's super rad. Part of me just wants to play it without having played the demo, know nothing about it, and be surprised by it day one. I
haven't played the demo.
Yeah,
either.
Really excited to play it. But I'm not really a demo guy. Like, I guess every time I play a demo, I'm just like, why am I not playing like a real game, like a full game, you know?
Yeah.
Rather than like a teaser, then I'm going to be like, oh, the end of August can't come any sooner.
Well, the funny thing is, back in the day, and it was just because demos were like free games.
Right,
to me.
right. Yeah.
Like I used to play like when the 3DS had like I would search the 3DS shop for just games with demos,
Definitely.
and I'd be like, give me demos.
Yeah, if you're hurting for games, demos are awesome. I think demos are wonderful too if you're kind of on the fence. I mean, I know I'm going to buy Armored Core 6 at some point. I know I'm going to buy Sea of Stars at some point. So there's not that utility there for the demos for me. But as far as Armored Core 6 goes, I'm really looking forward to seeing how people react. It seems like the FromSoft fandom is very frequently thrown under the bus on social media. I had a pretty great experience with them when I jumped into Elden Ring. Some of them could be very, very welcoming. Some of them could be very gatekeepy, which seems to dominate a lot of fandoms these days. But it'll be interesting to see some of those from Softians who maybe have never played Armored Core because it is so old. And then others who are relatively new, either to Souls or to Armored Core at all, and just kind of see how people react across a wide spectrum, and see if this is going to be fairly inaccessible, fairly complex, and hard to manage for a lot of people. Again, big fan.
And it's interesting too because you talk about turning it into Dark Souls, and that doesn't even necessarily mean making it accessible.
No, it doesn't. Yeah,
in the least.
No, you're absolutely right. What helped me get through Elden Ring, and I think Elden Ring is even like a more accessible version of some of those other games. What helped me get through Elden Ring was just kind of taking my time, especially with the open world, doing some grinding, which it seems like is something you can't always do in those past games, as well as, taking advantage of some options like ranged combat and stuff like that. And then also just thinking, hey, this is just a 3D bloody Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 kind of combined into one game. Thinking in terms of the really kind of technical combat, and then with really limited weaponry, especially at the beginning. And then just going around and exploring stuff in any direction that I wanted to. But with Armored Core, I almost kind of hope and pray that's not so hard that people will really get turned off, because I feel like the difficulty of Armored Core is different than the difficulty of Soulsborne stuff. Like playing through Bloodborne, I didn't manage to finish it. I need to get back to it. But certainly not as many kind of options as in Armored Core. Whereas in Armored Core, there's been games where I just felt overwhelmed at the sheer number of parts that kind of bombard you, even early on in a game, where you haven't really figured out, what your play style is, what kind of things are needed for a certain mission, and how to compare parts with each other to see what's more useful to you in a certain situation. So that kind of strategic planning difficulty may be something that people struggle with.
Yeah. Well, and let alone I'm sure most people intuitively can figure out like what kind of weapons they might want, but they're like, what even is an FCS?
Right.
Why do I need?
Yeah.
What does that do?
Yeah. And how do you choose between two missile launchers? What do all these?
That's why you gotta just fall face first into the power plant that's on fire and learn what a radiator is, man.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. There's a lot of stats to crunch through. It's not like Elden Ring was a fairly typical RPG, action RPG, as far as like stats and things like that. When you're looking at, Armored Core, you've got all kinds of things. Like you were talking about earlier, you've got to worry about your cooling, your weight, your armor, your offensive capabilities, your aiming, all that stuff. And it comes down to parts.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that kind of struck me about because I have been following Six, and they're really, for as big of an announcement as it was, this was like the one more thing at the Game Awards, if I'm remembering correctly. I think it was Game
I think
Awards,
so.
or
Sounds right.
one of those Jeff Keighley events. At any rate, Summer Game Fest maybe. And after that, there was a long period of just silence. We've got some gameplay trailers since, but it hasn't been at like the big events. Like it's just been like uploaded to their own YouTube channel. I almost get a sense that like either FromSoft or maybe it's Bandai Namco, the publisher. As I mentioned, they've hopped publishers, but Namco's published 5 and Verdict Day, so they're sticking with them for now. There was like they published with Sega, with Ubisoft, a bunch of people in the past. But maybe it's the publisher. I think might be content to just let people think it's Dark Souls with robots so that they buy it.
Yeah.
And when they find out later that it's not, they can be as upset as they want. They made the sale.
Right. And then
it actually reminds me a bit, if anybody else remembers XCOM Enemy Unknown, the trailers for that game made you think it was a shooter. Like they were dead afraid to show like the actual tactical view and be like, no, this is a turn-based strategy game, because nobody was buying turn-based strategy games then. And then it came out and reinvigorated that entire genre. But it's funny how that works sometimes. Yeah,
and then you'll have fans argue about how much it sells, but nobody's arguing about how much it's returned or refunded.
Yeah.
It's
well, sure.
It's definitely one way to get those initial units moved. And bait and switch tactics are certainly not unknown to this industry, sadly. But yeah, I obviously, as a fan of the series, I hope it does real well. I hope people gravitate toward it. I hope it has that balance that 5 really didn't work for me. So I hope it's not something that just kind of falls by the wayside. It seems like there's decent hype for it.
One of the things that gives me a lot of confidence is there was an interview with the developer, I believe it was on IGN. And not to throw them under the bus, I think this interviewer was not doing a great job. But maybe they were, because I think it told us a lot. Because they, multiple times in their questions, seem to be leading and basically begging for, tell us this is like Dark Souls. And the person they're interviewing repeatedly is like, no, it's not. This is Armored Core. It's its own thing. It's funny. It's like multiple questions. It's like there's a very blatant one at the beginning that's like, is this going to be like Dark Souls? And they're like, well, not really. I mean, Armored Core has its own thing, and we want to focus on that. And but they bring it up again. Like they talk about like the stagger system. They're like, oh, that sounds like Sekiro. And they're like, well, actually, it's not. Here, let me explain why it's not. It's actually kind of hilarious to me.
That's interesting.
That interview played out that way.
Nobody really wants to be typecast, too. I don't think that they want to be known as all we do is this one, type of game. Nobody would really like that. So I imagine that's not the first interview that went that way.
Sure,
well, it won't be the last.
Right. Well, and it's because we do see from some of the stuff that's trickled out, like there are some elements making their way in, and there's some elements Armored Core's always shared,
right,
with the Souls games. Like FromSoft has always kind of put their story in little breadcrumbs that are in the background. They're not in the foreground. Like that's something both series share, for example. But stuff like the repair kits, stuff like there does seem to be a little bit more melee combat. Even the way the bosses operate, bosses seem to be a big focus for 6. But at least with that interview in mind, what that tells me is they aren't just copy pasting this. Like, how can we apply the Dark Souls formula to Armored Core but rather, hey, it's been a long time since we made an Armored Core game. We've learned some things about game design and about just everything about how to make a great game from all the games we've made before. Let's figure out how that best fits here. And if it does, integrate it in a way that makes sense. And yeah, like repair kits are going to change things up, but that means maybe we can get long form missions, which could be very interesting. We'll just have to see how it works. So, any closing thoughts on Armored Core? John, have we sold you on the series? Are you going to go pay top dollar for every single game? I don't think I even counted how many there are, like 13.
There's a good amount in there.
Too many.
More than 13, I think.
Man, I should have bought some of these on the on my PS3.
Oh, they were up on the old PS3 store?
Yeah, I think they were considered a classic, the PS1 games. So I think the PS1 game is almost $100, I think, to buy complete. It's not worth $100, I don't think.
No. I think 2 is still the cheapest. I think 2 Another Age is a lot more, but I think 2 is sub $40.
I might try to pick up two or three.
3 is great. I mean, 3 really to me seems like it's the pinnacle of like classic Armored Core. Like I said, like the first 3 generations share a lot more similarities than 4 and 5. As much as I actually like 4, I think 4 is more accessible at the end of the day. I mean, it probably just by virtue of being more modern. And it is a little bit faster paced, a little bit twitchier, and I think that's something more people can understand more naively. Piloting a mech that controls like a tank often is frustrating for newbies. Piloting something that can flitter about in the sky lightning fast is a little bit more immediately gratifying.
That's well put, I think.
That one's Armored Core 3 is about $70 complete.
70, really?
Yep.
Yeah. How much is Silent Line?
It's crazy how much these have shot up.
Probably like the same.
Yeah, they're going up.
I mean, they were trending up before, but it's definitely Armored Core is a thing that we should pay attention to again. Bump.
Yeah, it's all about that demand.
Well, especially with the new game coming out, it's going to start driving the cost up on all the other ones.
Yeah. But yeah, even I'm more surprised at like 4 and 5 because like even now, like 360 games, PS3 games, like those usually aren't expensive. It's a pretty unusual PS3 360 game that's like high price. It's not something a lot of people are collecting, it seems.
Yeah, let's see. 3 is $60.
It's just like buying it new back in the day, right? Well, no, that would have been 50.
No. Yeah,
for
it's
PS2.
more than new.
More than new still. Just for inflation. There you go. Trying to make it easier on you. Trying to make you feel better.
I might pick up one and try to experience the classic formula alongside the new game.
Yeah, I think 6 is definitely going to be a lot of people's entry point. It'll be interesting to see how people take to it. But with that, we'll close it out and move on to a couple community couch questions. Presto, the Magnificent, asks us, what is your favorite musical or song from a musical? Now, I didn't clarify what Presto meant by this. I don't know if he's accepting live stage performances only, or also musical films? Musical films I have a lot more experience with.
Same. I don't know that. I mean, most musical films started out as a live performance at some point.
I might be stretching the definition a bit, but I mean, is Scott Pilgrim versus the World not a musical? There's a lot of music in it. Oh, it's like my favorite movie.
I actually
there are multiple songs.
I have no
multiple songs.
Don't know that I would
original songs.
I like Scott Pilgrim, but I don't know
Disney
if
movies
I
are
would...
musicals. That's the whole point.
Well, that would be like every Disney movie then. Yeah, but I don't consider them like they're not like a stage.
Okay, what about
musical,
Muppet Christmas
like
Carol?
Film
That's
format.
a musical, right?
It's like animated
Muppet
musical.
Christmas Carol.
Okay,
There we
is
go.
kind of a
Yeah.
Oh, which song?
I will accept that.
Ooh.
Which song?
Ooh,
is that the question, right? Which song from?
And
And do you have to sing it?
One song,
I'm pretty sure.
it's got to be Marley and Marley, right?
Says you have to humiliate yourself singing it. We're Marley and Marley.
You know, I listened to the official soundtrack. Actually, there's like a stanza that's cut from that.
I love Michael Caine singing
actually
that.
Kind of interesting. Yeah, and it's interesting that they cut it.
Oh, really?
Because it's
it's
a much more
naughty?
hopeful ending to the song, because they say like they say something to the fact like the meaning conveyed is like you still have a chance to change. Whereas the way it plays out in the movie, they're just like, you have forged chains with your greed. A nightmare waits for you at the end. Goodbye. Like, it's just like they leave that question completely open. Like, is there even hope for him to change? Which is
later.
I think great, actually, that it was cut, but interesting thing. Mm-hmm.
Every time Robin sings on that movie, I'm just like, please don't, Robin. I gotta get choked up over Robin. Tiny Tim, whoops. Use that in-universe name.
I was trying to look through and just see if there was anything that really stood out. Because obviously, it's become one of my favorite movies because it's one of my wife's favorite movies. But Singing in the Rain's like a classic. Like, can't go wrong.
Yeah.
But for like a more modern type musical,
I actually
really
have
enjoyed,
not seen.
like,
I have
Sweeney Todd
only seen
really
the first film adaptation of Sweeney Todd, which is
And
before
then,
the musical adaptation. It started as a novel. There was a film based on the novel, and later a musical that later had a film based on it. The one with Johnny Depp, I think. Yeah.
Yep. And then we can't forget about Little Shop of Horrors. That's probably my favorite, personally.
Which song?
Oh man,
freaking
so many
Dentist
in that one. Yes, the Dentist is great.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite Steve Martin performance too.
It's so good. Like, it's so different, like, from his norm.
I normally don't like him in any roles that he plays unless he's kind of playing off somebody, but like I'm like, well, Three Amigos, I guess I like that movie, but like,
but he has two good like other comedians
exactly
to go off of,
it's ensemble. But
what about The Jerk?
Not really. I don't know, I feel bad sometimes.
There's bits of it that are okay, but it's kind of hard to get.
What's the one where he has a really long nose? Do you remember what I'm talking about? It's like a huge, like, prosthetic, like a really pointy nose.
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember. He always does good
Roxanne.
whenever he's like not the focal point of the movie. He's like a character.
Yeah,
in the movie.
Like, to bring up Muppets again, the first Muppet movie when he's that really rude waiter with like shorts on. Yeah,
Yes.
that's funny. But yeah, I just don't like him when he's like
Good in
when
small
he's like
doses.
the main thing. But oh my gosh, the I'll be your dentist and good in small doses, and the Bill Murray scene in Little Shop of Horrors, who's just like hurt me more kind of way with the dentist.
Yeah.
That's brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't given your answer.
Sorry, I
have you?
kind of got too excited for your answer there, for a second.
Hey, that's all right.
Well, Little Shop of Horrors is really up there. I really adore that movie. Watching it for a long time kind of descended from my love for like B movie horror kind of stuff. But over the years, I've come to realize that I actually really do like musicals. Rewatched Grease recently and remembered hating it when I was a kid because they showed it to us at summer school, and probably shouldn't. I mean, that's a fairly raunchy movie, but
Yeah.
they showed it to us, and I thought they were like, "Hey, we're gonna watch Grease," and I was like, "Cool, a historical epic about antiquity," because I was really into history as a kid, and I find out they didn't mean Greece; they meant Greece.
Yeah.
And yeah, a little bit of existential horror there. But this last time I watched it, I was like, "There's a reason why this movie's beloved by many." But I think
Ooh,
my
that
answer
is a
is
good
going
one.
to be Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. With,
The
of
only one
course,
that matters.
the great Gene Wilder.
I was gonna say.
Yeah,
which one
no,
do you...
yeah,
Hey,
definitely
honestly,
a
it's
classic,
not
yeah.
bad, but like
Gene Wilder.
There's people that will fight for that.
They
new
will,
one, and I
and
don't
they can
understand
just
it.
go somewhere else and live their lives far away from me. But yeah, no, Gene Wilder screaming is probably one of my favorite things in cinema history. Anytime he's yelling at the top of his lungs, a young Dr. Frankenstein where he's just screaming constantly.
He's
Yeah.
he's always so
Yeah.
animated. He always like his characters.
They
are
really
the
are.
best.
They really are. That's a movie that I just have. For me, it's timeless. I watched it as a child, loved it. I've watched it as an adult and loved it. I've shown it to my kids and they love it. Now as an adult, I kind of appreciate some of its drier humor. Like, when you get early on all those like separate scenes of people trying to get a hold of more chocolate, and like there's the lady who's like, her husband's being held for ransom, and they're like, they want your chocolate bars. And she's like, how long do I have to think about it? I was like, that's actually really funny.
It is.
But yeah, there's quite a few songs in that. It's the classic. If you want to view paradise, simply look around. And I always get sucked into that movie. The stuff looks fake as heck in that movie, Yeah, it looks
I
like
feel
a
like Playground
but...
is suitable for
special
the
effects weren't the focal
for the
point of
No.
the movie.
Yeah. It's kind of what it is. So, I would probably say that is probably my favorite. But yeah, it's a genre that I've come to be comfortable saying that I like now.
So does that make you a Footloose guy?
I haven't seen that for a very long time. So I don't know. I would have to rewatch it. I've seen a lot of stuff, but I don't have a great memory. So, another one that sticks out though is shout out to Phantom of the Opera. Weird movie. But wife really likes it. And,
Sure.
Yeah, so you gotta jive with that. Is Labyrinth a musical? Yes.
I would consider it. Yes.
David Bowie. I mean, that's good stuff. So yeah,
it's got to be.
Yeah. So
one that it's animated, but my kids will watch the Lorax like over and over. Like it's just constantly going in my house.
Oh,
and it's basically just a musical.
My Fair Lady. How did I forget My Fair Lady?
Well, I'm trying to
have
think.
either of you seen Sam's doing that face like I don't know what
it.
you're talking about. Have you seen My Fair Lady?
Yeah.
Was Audrey Hepburn and Rex Harrison. It's older.
Yep. I've seen it,
Yeah.
but again,
Okay,
it's been
that's one
a
to
long
watch.
time.
It is top shelf. I mean, Rex Harrison plays this linguist, and he makes a bet with this other guy that they can't take basically like this, woman who lives in a gutter who has terrible like Cockney English and like
Wait,
turn
so
her into this elegant
is
woman
that
who speaks perfect English in like a year's time or
is the
something like that.
original called Pygmalion? Because I'm thinking of it was like a play, but maybe it got a
I don't know,
musical.
actually.
Am I crazy?
I think that there was a play. I think there was a stage musical that had and I'm drawing Julie Andrews, I believe,
Okay.
and then
I'm
she
not
was
crazy.
recast.
I remember
as
in
Audrey
school
Hepburn
we
for the
read
film.
the play
Pretty
Pygmalion,
sure.
which My Fair Lady is the musical
Okay.
adaptation of. There we go. Because
Okay.
I'm like, that plot is very well. Yeah,
Very
it's made for
arguably
for the
a better
classical
name
reference. The idea was he's like Pygmalion. He's sculpting his ideal woman out of raw material, which is a little crude way to put it, but it's also commentary on doing that. So
yeah, that's essentially what it is. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well,
shout out
there
to
was
the Wizard of
there was
Oz as
definitely
well.
as
There's
you
a lot of
think
shout
about
outs that are
like
just
the
coming
golden
out.
age of cinema.
There's
so many. It is a rich.
I mean, back
genre.
before you could rely on special effects to wow people, like song and dance was the best way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, there are people that are really good at it, You just watch some of his old stuff with Fred Astaire, and you're like, wow, dude could dance.
So
people
as
that you didn't realize still, had those
all right.
chops back in
Sound
the
of
day.
Music.
Yeah.
That's a classic.
Sound
one
of
too.
Music. I'm just gonna do this all night. Just keep naming.
Yeah. Well, as a follow up question,
Yeah, you gotta stop.
Presto asks, "What
Yeah,
game
definitely.
would you make into a musical, and what would be the big show-stopping number?" So this kind of reminded me when it first kind of leaked that Jack Black had a number in the Mario movie. People were like, "Is this going to be a musical?" Maybe it could have been, but that would have been kind of weird. I think it's one thing to give Bowser one song; it's another to like have Mario sing.
Yeah, could you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anybody doing
Chris
a Mario
Pratt,
voice
singing
would just
in
probably
that,
not.
voice,
trying to
great.
sing something.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would want to hear Charles Martinet try it at least, Yeah.
Try to sing. Yeah, that would be interesting.
I just saw Oppenheimer recently, and so I can't help but think, what if Oppenheimer was a musical? Yeah.
A musical.
What if it was like a hip hop musical, And he's just like, yo, I dropped the bomb right on your mom because they call me the bomb.com.
So there is an epic rap battle. There is an epic rap battle with
Can't see it happening.
I recall.
You guys lost all your viewers right there. Yeah, him versus who was it? Heisenberg.
Gosh.
All the way across the ocean.
I think they peaked a while ago.
Epic rap battles. Haven't heard about
Yeah.
that.
But this is
so
specifically
like
a game that would be a musical.
For sure.
I see
games.
Oh
yeah.
No.
Final Fantasy.
It's already
X2.
a musical game. See, I want to say Donkey Kong Country, but I know how the cartoon.
It already is a musical.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Cheater.
Well, I was thinking the Donkey Kong Country cartoon, which was musical.
You would just get Donkey Konga. Oh,
well, or
so this
theater,
is a film adaptation. That's a
game
becoming a video
musical.
game. Okay,
but I do think Donkey Kong, just because Donkey Kong has great music, like I actually just want
see a
Grant
Kirby
Kirkhope
game
to write a musical.
Yeah,
that's what I want.
Yeah. I was just say usually a Kirby game would make like the story would make for a good musical. Like there's always like the the deeper meaning to Kirby's games that could probably be brought out more in a musical format. I can almost see like a Kirby Opera or something.
I could see that. This is probably my obligatory Chrono Trigger mention right here. So, you know.
But what would be the
This,
big number?
Yeah, I'll just say that. What would be the big number? Oh, God, I just remembered this. So I'm sorry to everybody listening who didn't know this, but now you're going to learn it against your will. There is a Chrono Trigger musical on YouTube. Somebody wrote music, lyrics, song for basically like a playthrough of Chrono Trigger. And it is there are people who like it, but there's a lot of people like myself who find it incredibly cringy. Definitely go listen to it. Tell him I sent you. And the battle with Megas theme sticks out as just a really ballsy piece of work. Like, what to think that you could take, one of the greatest games of all time and turn it into a musical definitely takes a lot of cojones. But they did it. It's been done. So I don't know. Maybe I can't say Chrono Trigger then.
Solo from Gato. Like an entire 5-minute track.
There you go. It's probably in there too. I mean, there's.
Tell me more about your metal joints.
Yeah, it was just him just doing karaoke.
Just noises.
Yeah, he's just third stanza on my silver points. Tetris would make a cool musical if it was about the history of the game development.
I just want to see
how it was
actors on a live
Boy
stage
like that,
somehow form into Tetris blocks.
Should have been a musical.
Been made.
Form into blocks and clear lines somehow.
Being tetraminos.
Yes.
Tetraminos that's how I say it.
Tetradominoes?
Make fun of my accent.
Tetraminos.
It must be my Kentucky roots showing. I don't know. Donkey Kong Country, if I'm going with that still, definitely got to be Sticker Brush Symphony, right? That's the big number.
Oh, yeah. A lot of aquatic ambience.
But see, I don't think that would be that wouldn't be like the one that swells and gets a reprise. David Wise's Sticker Brush. That would be a high point.
It doesn't make for a big number
as far as quality goes, but it would probably be in a more mellow scene,
I want to see a guy in a fat suit as King K. Rool doing that. It's kind of belting it out. I would pay to see that for sure. I would go to New York City and go to
you got a Nintendo
the stage
store.
play there. So roll it out, Nintendo. There. Let's hear it. Yeah. Right. Have a guy stand out front with the open guitar case. There's your musical.
What was your choice for a musical again, John? I don't think you said the number. Kirby. What's the big number?
Did we? I said Kirby.
Gourmet Race.
Oh, I didn't pick a number.
Green Greens.
And I don't know any good. I don't know the names of any Kirby songs.
Oh my gosh, Green Greens. Yeah,
this is just DDD's theme.
There's some good stuff in there. Butter Bridge.
DDD's theme. I mean, I know the ones that
listen
show
to
up
Kirby music. I just don't know the names of any of the tracks.
Rainbow Falls.
Of course, nowadays I don't think I can hear some good music, Gourmet Race without that.
Just do DDD, the Drum Dash musical.
Classic mashup on YouTube. It's just one of those things. Yeah, drop it like it's hot. Fits perfectly over the Gourmet Race.
I know what we're listening to after this.
Yeah, because
was it one of those like Rick Roll fits over Robo's theme type thing?
Right, well, that's about it for our show. So look forward to all these musicals coming in your local community theater.
Let's close it out, man.
Eventually. But thanks for joining us, Moses. Is there anything you would like to promote? Last chance.
Oh man, everything. No, I'm going to focus on one thing. This week, we're doing Maui Week at thepixels.com. That's the-pixels.com. So all week we're going to be putting out articles on Hawaii-related video games. Now, there may be more than you think there are. And we're also attempting to avoid ones that are just kind of generically island themed, because there's certainly a lot of those. I mean, people will be like, well, in Mario Kart 64, there's Koopa Beach. I'm like, what tells you Koopa Beach is in Hawaii? Nothing really. Yeah, it's just generically a beach. So
there's one Koopa in a Hawaiian shirt.
I guess there's that, people will mention things. I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. Today, somebody was like Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow. And I was like, oh, how did I forget about Maui Mallard? It's in the name itself. So Pokemon Sun and Moon, Medal of Honor, somebody's doing one for the Pearl Harbor. There's a lot of Pearl Harbor flight sims. We're getting one for Star Tropics out. We're getting one for Wind Waker out that's focusing kind of on the decline and near eradication, really, of Hawaiian culture. There's a lot there that people just don't know about Hawaiian history. I really would encourage you, if you'd like to support the suffering people in Maui, we've got links on our website to do so, or please do look up a variety of charities that are doing really good work over there. For me, it's important to find a charity that is local and locally based and understands the unique needs of Hawaii, as opposed to international organizations that may not necessarily understand the unique dynamics of that state. But you can also support Hawaii by really understanding Hawaii better. And there's a lot of great documentaries out there. I'd encourage you to learn more about, the history of the indigenous peoples, King Kamehameha, the last reigning queen, Queen Liliuokalani, the theft of the land, the sovereignty movement. There's a lot that's going on over there that I think doesn't make it across the Pacific. So that's the big thing that I want to give a shout out to. Of
course, Moses is known online as the WellRedMage, so you can find him on Twitter, MageCast, all that stuff under that name. For more about all that he's doing, all that the Pixels is doing for this special week, I guess. And that is a wrap on our show. So thank you for listening to the RetroLogic podcast. We are proudly part of the Nintendo Dads family of podcasts. If you like what you hear, you're welcome to jump into our friendly and 100% non-toxic Discord community. You can also find everything on our website, retrologic.games. Have a good night.